My baby dolls, we are back again on Genesis. This time it'll be a special show. We're moving away from the sports area and we're getting into entertainment. As always, I am your host, Ian Kahanowitz, and we have returning guest Gloria Loring on the show today. This is her third time on my show, and it's always an honor when Gloria returns because there's just so much to talk about. And we're going to get to Gloria in a few minutes. A lot of stuff's going on in the world. We have earthquakes going on. We got hurricanes, which are doing immense damages. And we're going to relate all this to Gloria's books on how to deal with these kind of tragedies and how to deal with your own circumstances in life, because I think it's all relevant. I think this couldn't have been more than a perfect timing to have Gloria on the show, because there's so many people who need her kind of advice and the kind of training that she has. You are listening to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network with the Zigzag Man, Ralph Tycho. He's our boss, and the network is growing. A lot of shows are on, YouTube and Spreaker and iTunes. We've got a nice following, a lot of sports, some entertainment, some news. I'm just happy that my show is on the network there. It's been on now for last year, and it's really going well. I get a lot of compliments on it, and I hope that you folks at home, you learn a lot. Now, Gloria Loring, she's been on the show a few times. Many of you know her as Liz Chandler on Days of Our Lives, and, of course, you hear her voice every time in syndication with The Facts of Life, and, of course, it goes farther back than that. It goes back to the 1960s with her. She has a famous son, Robin Thicke. We spoke about the cookbooks that she wrote on previous shows. We spoke about her commitment to juvenile diabetes and diabetes in general. An amazing woman, an amazing life, and she's here to share what's going on currently. Welcome back to the show, Gloria.
Thank you, Ian. It's nice to talk with you again. You're always so cheerful.
Well, I am diabetic, and like I discussed with you last year, I almost lost my foot. I had bunionectomy, and my show was off the air at the time because my old network, the producer, retired. And when I came back, it's an amazing thing that I stopped eating. They give me this Victoza stuff now, which really dissuades hunger and weight loss. So the last time I spoke to you, I was in the process of losing weight. I've lost 47 pounds.
Wow.
My A1Cs are 6.3 now.
That's amazing.
And it's been like this.
But people need to understand, an A1C is a blood test you get every 90 days, ladies and gentlemen out there, and it tells you what your overall blood sugar control is, and you want to be below 6.5. Somebody without diabetes is usually in the 5s, so to have diabetes and be 6.3 is really excellent. It means you're really taking good care of yourself, so congratulations.
Thank you. I can't exercise still because my feet, after 7 operations, still aren't better, but I'll get back. I'm planning to run the Boston Marathon in a few years.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, because I'm up here in Boston. But first of all, I want to just say mazel tov. We got another grandbaby on the way. Let's talk about this.
Yes, Robin and his dear lady, April, love Gary. Her mom and dad named her April, but she was created in the month of April and was a surprise to them, to Dee Dee and Patrick, and so they named her April Love. And anyway, she's a really, really special lady. I like her so much. And she is expecting a little girl. Now, here's the interesting thing. I wrote my book about Coincidence is God's Way of Remaining Anonymous, with Albert Einstein's quote. And this little girl, for my son and his lady, the due date is Alan Thicke's birthday, March the 1st.
He would have been 71 on that day.
I know, but isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
How do you explain something like that? I mean,
you don't explain it. You just take a look and go, "Wow, that is very interesting." There's no explaining. I mean, there's some things that just happen, and maybe there's some connectivity. I don't know, but it just makes you smile, because they lost their dad only last December, so it'll be just a little over a year when this little girl is born. Now, we don't know that she's going to be actually born on that day, but just the fact that the due date is kind of fun.
Now, let me ask you this. Now, you have one grandchild. You have a grandson, and I see all the pictures on Facebook.
No, I have three grandsons.
Okay.
I have Brennan has a son, my older son Brennan, who has diabetes for going on 40 years in another year or so. He has a son named Tyler who is 9. Robin has a son named Julian. And my husband's son has a little boy who is 2 named Aiden. So we have 3 boys, and so you can imagine we're very excited about having a little girl.
Now, also, Brandon's going to adopt. I think I spoke with you last month that he's thinking about adopting another little girl.
Well, they've been fostering a little girl for over 9 months, and they're in the process of getting all the paperwork and the final things, and we'll just see. It's just taken a little while for the mother to get herself, I guess, together and at some level, I don't know, something with paperwork, and but that process evidently usually takes around a year or so, and it's about 9-10 months now. So hopefully within the next couple of months, that will be culminated in an adoption.
You're going to be busy now. 5 grandchildren, diapers again. I mean,
well, I'll let them do the diapers. Although I don't mind. Diapers are no big deal. I mean, for heaven's sake, I clean up after my little doggy occasionally, so it's a big deal.
Yeah. You had kids. I don't know what it was back then. My kids are the same age as Brandon's kids. I got 2 kids who are going to be 10 in November. And I remember, because I had twins, all the fathers out there, they refused to touch a poopy diaper. I said, you got to be kidding me. I diapered 3,000 diapers in the span of 6 months. I said, what kind of father are you? You don't even wake up to feed your kids. I said, I had no choice. My wife was exhausted. And yet, men cry about these things. I used to cry, and then I'd go to work the next day. I think I fell asleep on the highway driving when you hear the tire tracks, and I was so tired. And I tell my kids now, I said, boy, you guys are going to get payback from all the diapers I had to do. It's unbelievable what I had to do. But you know what? It's such a bond when you diaper them in the middle of the night, you feed them, and they're touching your hands and stuff, and that's how they get to know you.
Yes, of course. You're right there, and you're doing those things for them. It makes a big difference.
It is. Now, let me ask you. You were in a play this year, and we spoke about it back in February. You played Ann Landers, the lady with all the answers. What attracted you to sign up for this role?
Well, first of all, the offer came from Chuck Yates, who is the executive director of Coyote Stageworks, and I worked with him 3 years ago doing the Nora and Ephron play, Love, Loss, and What I Wore, and was given an award for it and this and that, and working with him in Palm Springs at the Annenberg Theater. It's a beautiful theater, and we just had such a wonderful experience doing it. There were 5 of us women who did it. And so I just thought, this will be quite a challenge, and it was. It was very, very demanding to have to learn an hour and 15 minutes of straight dialogue all by myself on stage with nobody to prompt me. There was nobody in the wings with a script if I forgot the line. So I went through a lot of fear, but I got through it, and we got standing ovations, and I'm nominated for another Best Actress award by the Desert Theater League, and so that's, I've won very few awards in my life, and it's very exciting, and it's really special, and I especially like it because these small theater companies, really struggle to keep themselves going and keep every season viable, and to be of help to my friend Chuck and be a part of a play that was so successful and well attended and well received is an honor, actually.
And Coyote Stageworks, I think, is a nonprofit organization.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it was a lot of fun, and people loved it. And Ann Landers was an extraordinary woman. She was such a hard worker, and she did her column, I had no idea, for 47 years. And the only reason she was in her 80s, the only reason she stopped is she was diagnosed with a particular very difficult form of cancer, and she decided she was not going to seek treatment, that she would just seek palliative care. And little by little, she turned her column over to her assistants who had helped her all those years write. And they knew how she thought, and they knew where she went to get answers. Because she had many, many expert advisors who she would call up and contact to get, the very best advice for her audience. So she had her assistants continue the column for quite a long time.
And I think she was criticized when she came out because she would write stuff on the presidents like Eisenhower and stuff, and they're like, "What are you doing?" You know.
Well, she was like that with Nixon. Well, Nixon, she was pretty critical of him. She was pretty critical of Johnson. She would go to him and say, "You have got to get us out of Vietnam." She would call him up. She was on a first-name basis with, the top people in power because she was so powerful. Her column reached millions and millions of people. And she had a twin sister who was Dear Abby, so it was Dear Ann Landers and Dear Abby. And there was a very strong competition between them. There were a number of years when they didn't have much contact. They'd had a falling out, and then they gradually patched that up. And so it's just a fascinating story. And she was one of the first people to talk about homosexual relationships. She would go and seek the best advice, and even though she didn't necessarily have that viewpoint at that time, once she understood the reasons for something or the reasons for a perspective, she changed her mind. She was very open-minded and very open-hearted. People would say liberal, but open-hearted would be my thought. And she contributed a lot of understanding out to people, and I was very, very impressed with her. I wish I'd known her.
It's funny because, it harks back to the days when, even way before my time, Hedda Hopper, I mean, she became the biggest thing in Hollywood in the 1950s, reporting on all the stars' lives and opinions and all this. And then Ann Landers and, Dear Abby, the sisters come along. And now I remember it all the time in the newspaper. Every day there was another column, what you should do, especially when the AIDS things broke in the mid-1980s. She was huge on writing articles about those who are homosexuals and those who had contacted the disease. And I remember reading her accounts, priceless. Yeah,
she was an advocate for human rights, for human beings, for goodness, for understanding, for empathy. And I felt very honored to play her. I felt a great responsibility. I think that's one of the reasons I was so nervous before some of the performances. I wanted to do her justice, but it all worked out well, and it was enjoyable. Once I got on stage, I would stand backstage and kind of shake and shiver before I'd go on. But once I got out there, it just started rolling, and it worked out.
Let me ask you, you've been in show business since, 1965, 66. I mean, you performed with Bob Hope. You performed going back to the Supremes. We're going to talk about Glenn Campbell soon. You've had a stage presence for such a long time. Why was this so daunting to you?
I think because of, not having any prompts to have. What happened was I worked on the script for a couple of months, just reading it every day, saying the words out loud, getting the words, in my mouth, in my heart, thinking and feeling about the images presented. And then I thought, I'm in pretty good shape here going into rehearsal. And the minute we added all of the movement and all of the physicalizations that I had to do, the words just went right out the door. I would turn, and he'd say, now turn and go over to the desk and pick up the piece of paper, and I'd pick up the piece of paper, and I couldn't for the life of me remember what I was supposed to say. And he said, no, that's perfectly normal. We did the same thing on the last play we did. The director was saying, you're doing fine. But it freaked me out. It just freaked me out because I've always had a photographic memory and prided myself on that. And this suddenly was just, without someone else saying, so how was your day? And now you know you need to answer that question. And you work back and forth and you work off of each other, and there's a flow. But I had to be the sole source of all the flow for my hour and a half on stage, so it got a little scary at times.
In your article, and this is, we're going to relate this directly on self-help, because you write that article, How to Drop the Drama, and again, Tadasana. How did you take the steps? I mean, you woke up at 2 in the morning, sweating, frantically going over lines, almost like Alfred Hitchcock. He used to get up during the night and write down a thought.
Yeah. I that was my nightmare. I would wake up in the middle of the night and try to run lines, and of course you can't do that. That's crazy, and that would just make me more afraid. And so what I did is I tried to change. My body was having its own reactions. I wasn't purposely thinking of it. Sometimes we'll go over something and how could they, and we'll rehearse our outrage or revenge or our perspective on things. I'm right, they're wrong. We'll rehearse it, and so we deepen that. But it wasn't that. It was that my body was just afraid. And I would wake up having this nightmare, and so I would do some deep breathing. I taught yoga for 7 years. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I've studied yoga philosophy for almost 30 years. So I would put those things to use, and they would help calm me down. And there was a prayer that I would repeat in the middle of the night, and then I would synchronize my breath with words of comfort, and so I did all these physical and mental things to calm myself down, to self-comfort, and that did help. I mean, I got through it and I did fine. So, but it was surprising to me how challenging it felt at the time.
And let me ask you this: when you're up there and you are, you're going through the lines, you have the live audience in front of you. Do you feel a connection with those who had come to see the play, the audience itself?
Oh, absolutely. And this particular play, because I'm on stage by myself, very often I am most of the play, I am talking to the audience, almost the whole play. And so, I'm getting them involved, and I'm asking questions of them. And now tell me, how many of you, raise your hands if you've ever done such and such, and so it's very much an interactive play, beautifully written by David Rambo. And we were so honored that he came to our opening night performance, the playwright, and he's written for, myriad projects, television projects, theater. He writes for NCIS, and just a lovely, lovely man. And we were so excited that the playwright, I was glad I didn't know while I went on for the show, but afterwards I was excited that he was there.
The show got rave reviews. I mean, I have something here. It says, go see Gloria Loring. I mean, now, in your opinion, you had 2 shows a day. I think it ran for about a week, up until the 23rd of April, I think it was. I forget. But you had 2 performances a day.
Oh, actually, no, I didn't have 2 performances. Oh, that would have been, oh my gosh, that would have been hard. No, I only had 1 performance a day. Usually a one-person show is 1 performance. But, we did 8 performances altogether. It's a short theater season for them.
And let me ask you this. Could you benchmark in your mind which performances were to your level of, say, near perfect as opposed to others, or you pretty much say, hey, this is all about the same, that it went off as well as it did?
I think that there were some where I felt a little more connected and a little more in the flow, and that always happens. Whether you're giving a singing performance or an acting performance, there are some that you have to suddenly, you kind of lose the flow and you go on technique. you know that you have to do certain things to deliver the material, and you have ways that you bring yourself back into the flow. So I think, most of them were at a really high level. The audience seemed to think so. So there wasn't anyone that I came off stage and that went, oh, my God, I need to quit the business.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Is there, it's funny how many biographies I've read about performers, especially singers like George Harrison. He had stage fright. I never knew that. Or Tom Petty. I've seen Tom Petty 10 times, and he said, before every show, I have those butterflies, like something's not going to go well, something. You even mentioned it in your article. Say, hey, what happens if I fall and break my leg on stage? I mean, what happens? Show's going to go on.
These thoughts go through your head. Well, I think, those of us who choose to be on a stage to produce music, I mean, some of us do. Some people are happy to just sit in their room producing music, and if it's a studio room or whatever room, but some of us go there because we want to be seen and heard. We want to share who we are. And at the same time, there's the other side of that coin, which is now that I'm sharing who I am and what I have to give, will people like it? So there's that terror that you're not going to be liked, that something is going to go wrong or you're not going to be good enough and you're going to disappoint people. And there are those of us who still have some sensitivity to that.
Yeah, and some it really is scary. But you know what I say, and through my various readings and stuff like that, I say that the live performance, the people that are doing these live shows, whether it's on Broadway, whether it's on a small theater, I think they need all their acting abilities because there is no margin of error. And if there is, you better improvise real quickly. You have to think on your feet. It's not like the cameras are rolling and then you make a mistake and so they yell, cut.
Yeah, you start again. No, I had that a couple of times in the play. I would be doing something and then I knew I had to turn and go somewhere else. And for just a moment, there was a little dropout. And I stood there and I literally said kind of, half to the audience, half to myself. Now, what was I telling you? And then, oh yes, and so you improv, you jump into something, and sometimes the brain jumps ahead on a story, and then you go back and you fill in, oh yes, and here's the other detail, and so it's like telling a story in real life. Oh well, I was going down to the Costco the other day. Oh, and I had my Cadillac, and as opposed to I was going down to Costco in my Cadillac. So you just put in the story points that are important, and you kind of you have all of your tools in front of you, and you follow the pattern as much as possible. But when the pattern slips away from you for a moment, you make it up as you go along, exactly as you said.
And let me ask you this: singing in front of a live audience, I think, is so much, like you said, you want to be on stage, you want to have that live connection. I think the Beatles made the biggest mistakes by stop touring because Paul McCartney always said, we stopped being a band when we stopped touring, we just were a studio band. When you're in front of an audience, Gloria, and you're singing the songs that after now 33 years, Friends and Lovers, on almost every Spotify or every Amazon Prime, I do the best 100 love songs of the 80s, and it's always there. And you could go check it right after the show. It's there. This is like a timeless. It doesn't sound like it was recorded in 84, 85. It sounds like it was recorded yesterday, and people remember. It's one of the best well-loved songs of the age. How does something stand up like that, even when it's not played on live audiences after all these years?
Well, I think, the people who know it love it, and sometimes people know it in a peripheral way. Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar. I've heard that, And whatever it is, look, it was an amazing time. I so much wanted to have a hit record, and I was given that, and was a part of helping create that. And they wrote Paul Gordon and Jay Gruska wrote a beautiful song, a very popular sounding song, and I recognized that and started to sing it on Days of Our Lives, and gradually we found a record company. Then I came in touch with Carl Anderson and thought he's got the perfect voice to sing this with me because it was supposed to be a duet. And, everything just unfolded. And I had that, I had that big hit record. And so I'm very grateful for that. And it was a great boost to me in every way.
And let me ask you this. You mentioned that you've been doing your yoga for 30 years. At that particular point in moment, because I remember being on the show and reading your book, the song was a hit. But then the legal battle that happened afterwards kind of marred,
Players. Yeah, well, what happened was the original producer didn't sign the paperwork with Atlantic Records, and Atlantic said, you've got to get him to sign it, and I had to hire lawyers, and almost all the money that I was going to make from the sale of the almost 1 million copies we sold went to pay off the lawyers. So, it's in the scope of a life, it's just money. And it didn't take the hit record away from me. So, but it was a lot of chaos at the time.
And because I thought about this the other day, because I do my homework on you folks.
You do?
I do my homework, and I know that in 1983, look, you got a divorce from Alan Thicke. You had 2 small children at the time. You were in a relationship with one of the co-stars of Days of Our Lives at the time, who was younger than you. You have a hit record. You have a lawyer. The lawyers are fighting. 1986 would be the last year of you playing Liz Chandler. This is so much change and so much like thrown at you at once. Did you have your yoga teaching yet? And if not, how did you handle all this?
No, I didn't have yoga philosophy yet. Talk about a time of great transition. The second week of September in 1986, Friends and Lovers became number 1 at every major market across North America. My first book was published. My divorce became final, and I left Days of Our Lives. 1986, second week of September. All 4 of those things, 2 things that came into my life and 2 things that I had to let go of. And, that's what I think is so fascinating about the way the energy flows happen in our lives. Sometimes things seem like they're ganging up on us, but I don't know why that happens. But we can look back at our lives and saying, my brother was in an accident, my this and that, and I got my degree, and it was all within 3 weeks. And so there seem to be these coagulations, confluences of occasions in our life that come together. Sometimes people say it comes in threes. I don't know about that, but I've certainly noticed that there are times when stuff just seems to appear all in a very similar time period.
Let's talk about that, because you talk about, the flow of, that's very important, the energy flow. There's positive energy, and there's definitely negative energy, and you've had your share.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And, we have an enormous part to play. There is coincidence, but we play a role in that. And we read this information again and again and again. There's not a thing but thinking makes it so. It's in the Bible. It's in ancient scriptures from all the different traditions. It's in psychology. It's in physics. It's in quantum physics, that the observer has an effect on what is being observed. So, and it's in The Secret, all of that. We have power. I know recently I had to have what I thought was going to be a very difficult conversation with someone, and I tend to get agitated with this particular person. And I decided ahead of time that I was going to focus my attention on absolutely no judgment. No matter what this person said, I was not going to say, oh, how could they? I can't believe, I would, in my head, the way we comment as the conversation is going on, we silently comment. And I spent the entire conversation being open-hearted and agreeable and empathetic and understanding. And the result that I wanted, that I thought I was going to have to fight for or push for, happened naturally of its own accord. And it happened in an environment of my giving permission for this person to find their own way, but making a suggestion of how things might work out if such and such happened. And it was 2 days later, I got a call, and what I felt was the best way to handle it was agreed to. And it is going to be a very good way to handle it, because we've gone back and forth about a number of things. So I find that in an environment of non-judgmental compassion, we very often leave all the doors open for the best way to be found by all parties concerned.
This leads into my next question, because it's very, very important for those, especially now. My friend, she's a bankruptcy lawyer here. She's a good friend of Ricky Martin, talking about Puerto Rico. Her house down there, the second floor, blew off last night.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, and I've seen you posted about, let's give to Mexico, let's give to Florida, which I did, let's give to, Texas. It's easy to tell someone, don't worry about it, God's going to be good to you, whatever they're going to say. That's not going to help. You lay out a roadmap on what you can do to prevent these thoughts of disaster and doom and gloom from getting into your head. This could be anything. It could be your mother in bed, and your sister's there, and she's like, well, I'm a victim. No one loves me, but your sister's right there,
Yeah. Well, we very often tend to look at what isn't happening instead of what is. We could be in between jobs, and friends are bringing dinners over, and somebody helped us get our car fixed, or all kinds of generosity comes our way. But we're only looking at the fact that we don't have a job right now, and we can say things like, nothing ever works out for me. I'm all alone in the world. Nobody cares about me, kind of thing. And when in truth, supposedly, the practice of gratitude tends to open the doors to more abundance. And, I don't know that there are any scientific studies, but if nothing else, it helps our own hearts and our own sensibility, our sense of life and connection. And it's, there are people who spend their whole lives not feeling connected, and that's such a hard way to live life. So each one of us has an opportunity to extend connection toward others, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be empathetic, to take a moment to display some activity of connection, and help others. We're not going to change anybody, but sometimes you never know. You never know. I remember a young girl, there was a song I wrote, and I wrote a song, it's called A Song for My Father, and it was about me forgiving him for his alcoholism and et cetera. And I sang the song, and a couple of years later I got a letter from her, and she said that song moved me so profoundly, and just by me telling my truth in a gentle, forgiving way, helped her come to terms with her dad and going and talking to him and them making amends. And, so when we raise ourselves up to a higher vibration, we give the opportunity to spread that in the room. Ian, when you're around someone who's angry and vengeful and just pissed off about everything, it permeates the room, and it can affect our own being. And yet when you're around someone who's got a very strong vibration of love and compassion and connectivity, that affects us. So we each have an opportunity to be a loving presence in the world. And I think that's a worthy purpose, I really am focused on that, to just try to be a loving presence. And when I feel myself moving away from that and getting, snarky or something, I try to, as quickly as possible, move back to loving presence, Gloria. Come on, you can do this,
It's funny because I like to equate, and I'm not sure I discussed this with you, our lives are like a pizza pie. We have 8 slices of the pie. If one slice isn't going well enough, like, say, our finances, or we lose a job, or we lose a loved one, we can't let that one slice contaminate the 7 things you have: health, friends, family, whatever they are, whatever you have, money. Some people are rich. They're rich financially, but they're poor in spirit. And that goes back. I don't know if you know who Swami Vivekananda was. He was a huge Indian guru who came to the World's Fair in Chicago back in 1902, and he predicted his own death at 40 on his birthday, and he died at 40. But his words of wisdom to the West was this in Chicago: the West is rich financially, but they are impoverished spiritually. And I totally agree with that, because look what we have to do now. We are working 100 hours. I used to work 100 hours a week. I carried my cell phone around with me and gave up vacations because I had a court case or something, and I couldn't let go. I couldn't do this. It destroyed my health. My diabetes got worse. Are we putting these material things in front of us and getting more stress from it than rather putting what's important in our lives? What's important in our lives?
Well, but maybe that's what we're here to do, is to learn what's truly important. And each of us has to learn it in his or her own way. You found your way, and, I've found mine. And some people seem to know early on, but the world is a big smorgasbord of opportunity and content and material things and spiritual things, and it can take a while to weed through it. And I think what counts most of all is where we are just before we leave. And not necessarily to those around us, of course. If we've lived a harmful life, that is very sad. But perhaps what matters most is in that final, that we awaken at some point to the truth of our own being, to the truth of everyone's being, and that maybe before we leave this planet, we can have an aha, oh, that's what I was missing all these years. And it can come at 20, it can come at 40, it can come at 60, it can come at 92, but I think that's a wonderful thing to look forward to, is that I'll have that moment. Evidently, did you read, I didn't read the biography, but that Steve Jobs, now maybe this is just hearsay, but I heard this story, that just as he was dying, he said, oh, wow, something like that, like he was seeing something amazing. And I love that. I love that maybe he saw, I've had some experiences of the depth of love that there is in the universe, just glimpses. And it's an oh, wow experience. There is so much love. There is more love than we can even possibly hold. It spills over and feels like it'll sweep us away, like we're not big enough to hold it. So maybe some of us get to have that experience before we leave here.
And it's funny because I did hear that about Jobs. And Thomas Edison, famous inventor, he died in New Jersey. But before he died, he was looking out of his window, and those who were around him, he uttered the words, "It is very beautiful over there." Now, you could construe it 2 ways. Number one, he had a great-looking backyard. I don't know if he was talking about that. Or was he talking about the afterlife or something he saw before he was ready to go? These mysteries. Yeah, people ask me, hey, well, Ian, they had to revive you off the operating table. Did you see anything? I said, no, it all went dark. The next I remember, I'm sitting in my bed, and I see my foot's looking like World War I trench. They just dug in. I mean, I didn't get that kind of afterlife theory. But I'll tell you one thing, the 8 limbs emanating from the central core of your yoga teachings, and that's a big thing. Did you learn about the yamas and the niyamas and the asanas and the pranayamas?
Yes, I've learned about that. I couldn't recite all of it because I don't teach it any longer, but The yamas are the things that we should do, if you want to use the word should, opportunities for goodness and balance, and the niyamas are the things to avoid. And we can each make up our own mind. The yoga philosophy is a codified system for the possibility of uniting ourselves with the highest principle of being a human being, which would be divinity, of course. So it's amazing stuff, and it's lasted all these thousands of years because there is a truth to it and a depth to it, and it's a gift to the world, and it supports all religions also, which I love too. So I want to tell you a story before we finish, which I think will be right in line with what we're saying, and I did write about this in my column for Soap Opera Digest, How to Drop the Drama, and that is, we were saying about this idea that just before you leave, maybe you see something or you experience something that you can share with others. And I told the story recently of my sister when she was in her final hours. It was 4 a.m, and I got a phone call, and I had come home to get some clothes and go back to the hospital and be with her, and it was her husband on the line, and he said, Peggy wants to talk to you. And she got on the line, and she said, Gloria, you must tell them, you must tell them. And she was whispering because she could just barely talk. You must tell them. And I said, okay, honey, now who must I talk to? And she said, the people in Washington. And I thought, because, she's on morphine at this point for palliative care. And I thought, Washington, the seat of authority, what does that represent to her? And I said, okay, the people in Washington, I must tell them. And now remind me what I must tell them, because we've talked about a lot of different things. And she said, you must tell them there is hope. And my sister died about an hour later. And how wonderful that it was so urgent to her. She could barely speak, but that she had to share with me that I must tell people that there is hope at the last possible minute. In every possible way, there is hope. And I just thought, what a beautiful message, and what a beautiful spirit for it to come through.
That's incredible. I got chills just thinking of that. That's amazing. It's truly amazing what the human mind can, what us as humans can channel these energies, these thoughts that come in.
What the human heart can receive, yes, absolutely.
If you let it.
Well, you have to open yourself, and sometimes it lets it, and you're not sure whether you should pay attention or not, but just imagine, is it kind? Is it connective? Is it compassionate? Is it empathetic? Yeah. Is it for goodness? Yeah. So, well, it's so nice talking to you again. We always get into such good long conversations with so much substance. I love it.
Well, hey, we're going to have you back on the show. I want to get you back on the show before the birth of your granddaughter, and
okay.
Now after, and we'll get you there. One last thing, Glenn Campbell. When did you perform with him?
Oh gosh, well, that's one of the stories in my book also, because coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. I'll give a little plug there. Glenn Campbell. I was on the Glenn Campbell show in January of 1970. And at that time, there was an art director on the show named Renee Logler, and we met just briefly. And then he went on his way, and I did the show, and it was so exciting to do the show with Glenn. And we actually have some of the footage of me singing with Glenn. And then 23 and a half years later, I met Renee Logler on a plane. He missed a plane for the first time in his life, wound up sitting next to me. We started talking. And we got married a year later. We've been married now for over 22 years, almost 23 years. And the interesting thing, even more so about that, is that we met in January 1970. And as he met me and I walked away, the thought came into his mind, that's the woman I'm supposed to be with.
That's amazing.
And almost 24 years later, we met again. And there was an instant connection, and we've been together all these years.
In January 1970, because you got married to Alan Thicke in 1970.
I met Alan 2 weeks after I met Renee, And I guess I needed to go through loving and dealing with Alan and all his stuff and my stuff intertwined, and how I needed to figure out who I was in this world based on what I agreed with him about and what I didn't agree with him about. And I had to go through that and then become my own person. I wasn't my own person back then. So I chose a powerful example of how to become my own person. And then I got to be with Renee again. So it's very sweet.
Yeah. And we'll get back to you probably around the Christmas time, Gloria. I'm going to end the show here. Just hang on to the line while I do. I'll speak to you for about a minute after. I know you're busy, folks. I had a great time with Gloria every time she comes to the show. It's an amazing journey into some place where you read in books, you go to church for it. Everybody learns a life lesson. Go out, get her books. God's Coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. Believe me, meditate over it. It's a great compass to helping you through life's adventures and, circumstances which aren't very good for you. But she's experienced all. Go out, make it a Christmas or Hanukkah gift. As always, I'm Ian Kahanowitz. Thank you so much, Gloria. And in the amazing words of Edward R. Murrow, good night, folks. Good luck. We'll see you next time. Thank you.